walking through the cemetery where perhaps the most famous poet and writer of short stories is buried.
His name, Edgar Allan Poe. Of course, everybody knows Edgar Allan Poe, quoth the raven, nevermore. We're in this cemetery on a day that's pretty dark and creepy, rainy. It's middle afternoon, pretty dark, leaves on the ground. Feels like a perfect setting to be in this cemetery. Crisp fall day. We're going to show you his original grave. We're going to show you where he is currently buried. And we cordially invite you to come along for the adventure.
Come along.
We're now heading toward the back corner of the cemetery. This is where we're going to find Edgar Allan Poe's original grave. This is where he was buried right after he died. It was right next to his grandfather, David Poe Sr., in this Poe section of the cemetery. Now, when he was buried, nobody put a headstone up to mark the location of his burial, which is right here behind us.
Family member Nelson Poe decided to take matters into his own hands. He purchased a white marble headstone for his grave. However, it never made it because a train actually derailed and went through the monument yard and ruined it. So they ended up using a sandstone block with the number 80 on it to mark his final resting spot.
Poe died at just 40 years old. His real-life death story would have made for a great short story written by Poe himself. It is still surrounded in mystery all these years later. He was in a tavern in Baltimore on October 3rd, 1849, and appeared to be wearing someone else's clothes. Many people seemed to think he was drunk and he was acting strange. He was taken to the hospital where he began to get a little bit better before getting worse and dying a few days later. People first assumed he died from too much alcohol, but the doctor found no evidence of alcohol in his system. Some people guessed he had rabies. Others thought he was a victim of a violent crime. Others thought epilepsy or heart disease. Another interesting theory is he may have been grabbed by a gang of thugs to do something called cooping, where an innocent bystander is grabbed near a bar, which was used as a polling place for elections back then, and forced to put on different disguises while voting multiple times for a candidate of the thugs' choosing in the election. This theory would explain the strange outfit he had on.
We are now walking over to where Edgar Allan Poe is actually buried right now.
This is toward the front corner of the cemetery. Right here is the grave. His wife is also buried here. There's a very interesting story about that. First, let's show you the grave. He's got a pumpkin out here and some flowers.
Here's an image of Edgar, 1809 to 1849. The design of this monument was done by George A. Frederick, who was also the designer of Baltimore City Hall. The monument was unveiled on November 17, 1875. It was paid for partially by a local teacher who collected pennies from her students, held benefits, and collected money from friends. Also, a couple wealthy businessmen made contributions as well.
When Edgar's body was first moved here to his current burial location, he was buried here alone. That's because his wife, Virginia, had been buried in a different cemetery. That cemetery, though, got destroyed, and her remains had to be pulled on up out of the ground. There were no living relatives around to claim those remains at that point in time. So that's when an early biographer of Edgar Allan Poe got involved.
He stored her remains in a box and actually put them underneath his bed.
That was for many years until on the 76th, what would have been Edgar Allan Poe's 76th birthday, is when finally her remains were brought here and laid to rest with her husband, Edgar.
For many years, possibly starting in 1949, a mystery man would show up here every year on the night of the anniversary of Poe's death to leave behind a bottle of cognac and 3 roses, probably for each of the 3 people buried under this headstone: Edgar, his wife, his mother-in-law, Maria Clem. Some of the bottles have ended up in the Baltimore Poe House and Museum. The person was given the name the Poe Toaster. Eventually, the original Poe Toaster died around 1999. Others have tried to copy what he did, but it was never the same after that. We've seen multiple people come in and out of this cemetery just in the amount of time that we've been here.
We haven't been here for too long either. For a man that died in 1849, it's amazing how many people still come to check out his burial spot. Y'all be sure to hit the like button, smash the subscribe button, and ring the notification bell so you can come along with us on future adventures.
Come along.